Hello, welcome to video tutorial structure of a narrative. Trying a different voice there, didn't really like it, so I'm going to go back to who I really am. Now, structure of a narrative. You say to me, what is a narrative, Mr. Edmonds? Well, we know what narration is, and once I fix this tool so I can scribble a little bit, excuse me while I fiddle. Excellent. We're looking here at this definition. The term refers to any story, whether in prose or verse, involving events, characters, and what characters say and do. A narrative is the story or account itself, right? You don't say, oh, yes, this is a narrative story. No. Narrative implies some kind of story, all right? That saying narrative story is an oxymoron, my friends. In narrative fiction, common to literature, which is also what we're interested in, the narrative is usually creative and imaginative rather than strictly factual. The fact that a fictional narrative is an imaginary construct does not necessarily mean it isn't concerned with imparting some sort of truth to the reader. Narratives can begin ab ovo, from the start, and work its way forward to the conclusion. That is, in a way, the way Gatsby works. Or it can begin in media res, in the middle, in media res, in medias re, whichever pronunciation for me, not great on this stuff. Starts in the middle of the action and then recounts through flashbacks. Now, in terms of plot and narrative structure, what's a plot? You say a plot is the stuff that happens in a book, the things that happen, the things that are said, the things that people do. Plot is the guts of the book. It's what it's about. It's not what it's about, but it's what happens in the book and moves everything forwards. Because if nothing happens in a narrative, it goes nowhere. Narratives without plots don't exist. Right? They're pictures. They're words that don't link together. Right? Now, a linear plot structure or linear narrative structure is when everything in the book happens in chronological order. It begins at the beginning when nothing's happening, sets up the context for everything that's going to happen. Everything happens in order of time, and it reaches its conclusion. Non-linear plots and narratives, much like The Great Gatsby, is where the plot's not presented in chronological order. You use flashbacks or flash forwards. All right, so The Gatsby is non-linear. Why? Well, we start with Nick Carraway, and he's basically told us, all right, I'm going to tell you everything about this guy, and I'm going to give you this background before I do. Right? Everything's happened, and he lets us know that. Now, different subcategories here. See, these ones here, we're looking at are subcategories, basically, of these two types, linear and non-linear. Chronological narratives with flashbacks is for the most part, a linear narrative structure, but it uses flashbacks or flash forwards within the text intermittently. Circular narratives start at the end and then jump back in time to the beginning and work its way through. The Gatsby is a circular narrative. Parallel narratives, where there's two separate storylines, or two or more, I guess I should say, they're completely separate storylines, so they seem, which end up being connected in some way. All right? Think to yourself straight away, the Game of Thrones. Right? In terms of a generational text, that's the best one I can give you right now. Much like examples of traditionally non-linear plot or narrative structures, think to yourself anything by Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, even to a lesser extent Reservoir Dogs. Now, subplots. We've talked about what a plot is, and that's the main stuff that happens, the main stuff that drives a story forward. However, within a story, there are also subplots. It's not the main storyline. These are the side stories, as I've put here in inverted commas, that contribute to other stuff. For example, the romance between Nick and Jordan, I would call a subplot within the text The Great Gatsby. Now, if we talk about narrative perspective, all right, that's the perspective the narrative is being told to the audience from. Two options, really. First person, which is told from the point of view of one character. It's an experiential plot. I've used the word experiential. Basically, it means based around the experience of that one person, and everything is centered from them. Uses a lot of I felt and I did and I saw and they were. Third person narratives are told from an omniscient, that means all seeing, all knowing perspective. That is, for example, uh, let's say the narrator of the story, or the person telling the story, is telling us about a whole bunch of different people and able to talk about what they say and what they do, and even sometimes what they're thinking without actually being there themselves. He, she, they, we, that kind of those kind of words give you a hint that it is a third person narrative. Now, the final thing I want to cover in this tutorial is discussing what narrative shape or tension is. And that's basically how the drama or the action of a text plays out. Whenever you read a book, you notice that there is some form of tension or action being created in the text. And what happens is they build up to moments where it resolves or something happens that makes the action or tension subside for the moment or ultimately. Now, traditional structure, all right, of a linear narrative, you get the tension building up all the way through the book. You hit the penultimate scene, the ultimate conclusion where it reaches its height and then is resolved. And then the tension builds down until you get your final conclusion of the story and the nice little wrap up. Now we have tension over here on the vertical scale and time on the horizontal scale. Now that's a very basic way of shaping dramatic tension. When we're looking at good literary text, the maps might often look like this or this. Now I'll stay with this peaky little one here that looks a bit like a wave. Now you think to yourself, well, that's a bit different. But if you look at it, let's say we're reading a detective book. We have the moment where the case is revealed to the two detectives. All right, and they have their first moment and they're thinking, all right, well, can I solve this? Then they get their first vital clue. And they realize, yep, you know what, we can solve this. These are the things we got to do. So the tension goes down a little bit. And then they hit a couple of obstacles on the way that they need to resolve. Can't find any evidence. They find a couple of crucial pieces of evidence all of a sudden. Oh, wow. We're really in this. This is feeling really good. You might start getting a couple of hints from the author. And then you find out, then you realize, hang on a minute, they're going to confront this guy. Finally confront the guy. They defeat him. Now you start finding out how all the evidence pieced together, what the consequences were, and the story and the narrative is resolved. And here you are at the end of the text. That's an action-based plot line or an action-based narrative, right? Traditionally, that's the way they work. Now, if we're looking at a character-based narrative, like really fancy literary stuff, the graph might be completely different. You might have some high tension at the beginning here that leads to something. And then all of a sudden, the tension subsides a little bit. Then you have a little bit of an upswing, slight resolution, and then you hit your ultimate tension again towards the end before all is resolved, right? One thing I do know for sure is that most good writers put the most important or most dramatic scenes right towards the end of their book to keep you reading towards the end and make you feel like you're rewarded for getting there. So those three little tips there, our narrative shape and tension, narrative perspectives, and plot/narrative structures are three important things to know now that we're looking at the novel/film The Great Gatsby. I hope that helped you out. Thanks very much for watching. See you later.